They're two happy women bringing you inspiring stories, politics, pop culture, and lifestyle hacks, all with an eye to making our communities and our country a better place to live. It's the Happy Women Podcast with your hosts, Jen Horn and Katie Gorka.
Doge strikes again and again and again. Just how much waste has been uncovered now? Well, we're going to tell you. Welcome to another episode of the Happy Women Podcast. I'm Jennifer Horn.
And I'm Katie Gorka.
All right. So when last we spoke, President Trump was getting ready for his big address to a joint session of Congress. And Katie, we have to spend just a few seconds talking about it because I thought this was the right tone. It was uplifting. It was positive. A lot of people I saw were talking about it being partisan, but I don't know. I mean, yes, it was scratching the itch, I think, of Republicans and MAGA Republicans that voted for President Trump. But the stories, the people that he highlighted, that was absolutely unifying, at least in my mind.
Well, what's interesting to me is the incredible approval ratings that he's getting for the speech. I mean, people really, really liked it. Not only did he get incredible support for the speech, but also a lot of condemnation of the Democrats for being petty, for grandstanding, for being undignified in the halls of Congress.
Well, and by undignified, you mean shaking their cane at President Trump, Representative Al Green
out, and the stupid little sign and the yelling. I mean, I have to say, if you've ever watched the British Parliament and the way they yell out and yell at each other, I've always thought it was like tremendously undignified, unbecoming, unproductive. And I don't want to see us go that way. So I was really pleased to see that they are going to censure Congressman Green, and that a whole bunch of Democrats sided with the Republicans on that note. I'm glad to see the Democrats aren't going with it. And I also really want to give a shout out. And I don't know her name. Who was the member of Congress when everybody's first walking out? It was an older woman on the right-hand side. And she was the only one that was like engaged and speaking to people. She was a Democrat.
On the Democrat side?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just saw so many of them. And sadly, I think they know they kind of got cooked on that. I think that the idea was to show up, but, many of them walked out at certain points. We had some local congressional representatives around me who walked out when they thought President Trump was talking about the connection between vaccines and autism and all these things. I mean, things that I didn't even hear that they kind of cooked up in their head and took with them as they left. They were all ready with their exit strategy. Al Green knew what he was going to do. He had it practiced. And here's where I was really disappointed. I had a lot of my liberal friends, including my mom, say, well, Marjorie Taylor Greene yelled at Biden during the last speech. Look, I get it if you're overcome with passion and you yell out something. Do I love it? Not really. I probably wouldn't do it, but I get it. Maybe you have to yell something. But when the president is announcing other Americans, people that you've been elected to represent, children with brain cancer, people who have lost their husband, people who have lost their children, a member of the military, or somebody who gets put into West Point after his father is killed in the line of duty, you stand up and you applaud. You can boo President Trump if you want. He's a big boy. He's going to be able to take it. But don't be so low class that you can't actually stand up and show support for other Americans who are probably suffering and needed to get that support. So I don't know. For me, that's where the line is, the line of in the sand. You can shout if you feel compelled, I guess, but get up and stand. It shows some respect. It really wasn't a great look. And I think when you looked at CNN, and that night saw the stuff that they were talking about and how they were hammering Trump for everything he said. And on MSNBC, when you had Nicole Wallace saying that DJ Daniel, she hopes that he has a career as a Secret Service agent, but she hopes that he doesn't commit suicide when he's defending the Capitol against insurrectionists. I mean, these people are so low class.
Yeah.
But when they have to announce that their own polling on CNN indicates that 70% of the country felt great about the speech, in a 50-50 nation right now, that's pretty darn good. That means President Trump brought some Democrats along with him. And I don't know. I thought it was well done, well crafted, and well executed. And I loved watching JD Vance, who sat behind him looking like he was having the time of his life.
Yeah. And I just have to say also, just from a personal point of view, it was really special to me that Trump announced that they had gotten the mastermind of the Abbey attack in Afghanistan. So after the speech, my husband was out at the tarmac at Dulles Airport as the plane came in from Pakistan with the FBI agents. Apparently, the Pakistanis were very helpful in making the arrest, and it was great. They were out there with the whole team of analysts and experts who've been tracking this guy. And apparently they were tracking him before President Trump came along, but it was President Trump who said, "Okay, let's do something about it.
Let's get him."
And again, it's like you just really it's the same thing. Sebastian went on Jesse Waters, I think just last night.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was coming home from the airport and I got to listen to it, but it kind of really hit home when he said the other attack that President Trump has approved was taking out the ISIS camp in northern Somalia. That was on day 8 of the Trump administration, and the Biden administration had been aware of that for 3.5 years, and they didn't do anything about it. And it's really concerning. I've had people reach out to me by text and say, what was the Biden administration doing, and why were they not keeping us safe?
Yeah, and we're going to talk about it too today a little bit later on in our episode, just about how the Biden administration let so many people with ill intentions come into our country and purposefully left them here. That's what I don't understand. And, Seb was nice enough to join me on the radio show after that attack not attack, but after that victory, I guess that'd be the better word, on the 8th day of the Trump presidency. And he made the comment that you just reiterated, and it deserves an underscore, that Biden's team knew about these guys for years, and they were just watching them. No action. And I would imagine the same thing with this individual from Abbey. They watched them. There's no action. And now we finally have some action, and the world is safer for it.
Absolutely.
All right. So one of the big items that President Trump talked about at the address to Congress was DOGE, their efforts to save some money. And of course, there are a lot of people on our side of the aisle who are happy to see Elon Musk just getting to work and doing his thing. But there are other Democrats who are not so happy. Bari Weiss, who's a great independent journalist, did a piece that you brought to my attention. You want to fill us in on this?
Yeah. So she actually reposted it on Twitter. But it was a piece, in fact, written. It was published on Bari Weiss's Substack, which is called The Free Press. But they have multiple journalists who work there. So this particular piece was written by Madeline Rowley, and it just doesn't stop. Okay, so here it is. So Biden had the $740 billion spent through the Inflation Reduction Act. And what Madeline found was, as a part of that, there was $27 billion managed by the EPA. But here's the kicker. 20 billion of that's billion with a B, went out to 8 nonprofit groups after Biden lost the election. After he lost the election. So each of these nonprofits got between $400 million and $6.9 billion, including Stacey Abrams. And here's what I find super interesting. Apparently, $16.9 billion of this money is still sitting in accounts at Citibank, and it has not gone out. So apparently, the Trump administration is really working to see if they can't pull this back. But I'm just so appalled by the level of corruption. This is not waste. This is not waste. That's corruption.
Just corruption. Yeah, It's feathering the nest of your friends, right? Your friends and your allies. And clearly, they probably did a ton of that after Biden lost the election, I would imagine, and just spent as they could because they knew that the gravy train was coming to an end. It's wild. We had a story this week in California. It didn't get a lot of national attention, and it's on a much smaller scale than what you're bringing up. We're talking about millions rather than billions. But by a state standard, that's a lot of money still, especially when you figure out that California is in a deficit right now. And Carl DeMaio, I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He did radio locally in Southern California, in the San Diego area. He decided to run for the assembly. He was actually very involved in trying to repeal the gas tax, a couple of big efforts that California really fought him on. And so he ran for assembly and got himself elected, which was great because we need more Republican fighters in Sacramento. The Democrats have a supermajority in our state. And the Republicans that are there are a few good fighters, but there are a lot of people who just kind of go along to get along too. So Carl DeMaio is one of those fighters. He last Friday he got put on the budget committee. He's sitting on the budget committee and they bring before him all of these different programs so that the assemblymen and women can decide whether or not to continue funding them. This was a proposal for another $25 million. They're getting $25 million a year for, are you ready for this? Workplace safety in the time of COVID program. Now, maybe you could justify this in 2020, but the last time I checked, it's March of 2025. And if you get COVID, now you just stay home for a couple of days, right? You don't need like special posters. We don't need special people coming in and telling us how to operate and wipe surfaces. We don't need any of that anymore. We're past that. So even if you could make the argument that this was valid, it's certainly not valid today. Well, Carl DeMaio did some digging, and when he looked to see who was actually performing this workplace training, he couldn't find any companies that were qualified in doing workplace training. They were basically all NGOs, left-leaning liberal activist groups that were getting this money in the name of COVID and training workers and employers in the state of California. And it was going nowhere, but once again, feathering their own nest. And so Carl DeMaio spoke out about it at the committee, questioned everybody. And because he got some attention, 5:00 on Friday evening, the Speaker of the Assembly stripped him of his committee assignment on the Budget Committee and took him off, moved him to some nonsensical committee that they put him on.
So corrupt. That's
at 5:00 on Friday. You know how it is. You live in Washington. You live near Washington, D.C. 5:00 Friday is when they try to bury everything. And it's unbelievable that, this stuff happens and people are paying attention now. So what do? They just try to silence you. They try to shut you down and pull you off your post. But unfortunately, I think that just brings more light to it these days. People are awake. They're paying attention.
I think, I couldn't agree more. So what I've been watching here in Fairfax County, you've got all these people. We're right next door to Washington, D.C. Everybody is watching these numbers coming out about these crazy amounts of money that have been going to, left-wing NGOs, left-wing media outlets, all these kind of crazy places. So now we know what happens now, right? That was the big wake up. Now we know that this is going on. So suddenly we're getting all kinds of people stepping up and volunteering and saying, we want to do the same thing with our Fairfax County local budget. And I think that's where we have to go. I mean, this story that you're telling is appalling. When you first told me about it, I thought it was a one-time $25 million. I cannot believe it. $25 million every year. That's crazy. And especially for a state that has a massive deficit. How can they do this?
How do you justify it? And that's just some of the ways. We've all talked about the crazy stories. We heard President Trump earlier in the week talk about this when he was moving to Congress. It's like the government has a purpose. The government is there to keep us safe. The government is there to provide roads and infrastructure. The government doesn't need to worry about leaving paper masks in a workplace 5 years after a pandemic. It just doesn't. I mean, that's not the function. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. There's always some fight in California, but there is a lot of corruption too. Now, some of President Trump's speech on Tuesday was focused on the border. A lot of huge stuff happening. And in fact, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, Tulsi Gabbard, a group of Trump administration members went to Eagle Pass, Texas on Wednesday of this week to see what's been happening at the border. We know some really good things, and that is that right now border crossings are at a 25-year low.
That's incredible.
And I know. As we record this together, President Trump's been in office 7 weeks, I think, at this point. 7 weeks in, and that was a job that Joe Biden said he couldn't do unless Congress passed meaningful legislation. Look at that. In 7 weeks, President Trump has created a scenario that hasn't been seen in 25 years. It's amazing.
Right. Yep. Well, on that note, I have to say one of the stories that I saw today that I found really crushing is this story from Breitbart. And in finding the story, I discovered something that I wasn't aware of, and I love that they do this. The Breitbart News Foundation has something called the Cartel Chronicles, and what they're doing is they're paying Mexican journalists to track the stories in Mexico, what the cartels are doing. And of course, these journalists are having to report anonymously or they'll be killed. But, I think this stands out for me. So this is a story about the bodies of 9 Mexican students that were recently found. They were on their way to the beach and they've had their hands cut off. They've been disemboweled. I mean, really horrific treatment. And I think part of why this is also kind of on my radar screen is because I told you I watched the movie Amelia Perez, which is very controversial. I know that conservatives have been, a lot of conservatives love to hate this movie because allegedly it's a pro-trans movie, right? The lead character is a trans man. But I have to say, I thought the movie was really powerful. And I did not think it was a positive depiction of trans people. So I don't think conservatives should be as opposed to it as they're saying. But one of the things that for me was very powerful about the movie is it really showed how devastating the cartels are. It showed the horrific way that they just devastate communities. All the, hundreds of thousands of people have disappeared at the hands of the cartels. And it really makes me feel that I am grateful to President Trump for the tariffs that he's imposing on Mexico, because part of that effort is to force Mexico to get a handle on the cartels. This has been going on for years, and we've tried the soft approach. We had this big, elaborate State Department funded program called the Merida program, where we thought we're going to go in, we're going to support their law enforcement, we're going to, work with their justices. Got us nowhere. Got us absolutely nowhere. So I am grateful to President Trump that he is taking a strong approach, threaten them with tariffs, absolutely, threaten them with where it's going to hurt, because what's happening in Mexico it's nothing short of a humanitarian crisis.
And you have to wonder, because there was a story out this week that some of the cartels now are running scared. You've heard about that, right? Where they're afraid to go outside. They're afraid to just operate. And that's good. That's what you want. Now, I don't know. They're so deeply dialed in with the government of Mexico that's why this tariff situation is so important. And Look, this is one of those issues, a lot like Ukraine, that divides conservatives a little bit. I get it. I understand that the idea of tariffs can be a little sketchy, a little scary for people, but you have to look at what President Trump has done so far. You have to look at his ability to make a deal, and you have to give him the minute or two that it's going to take to get this to come. And already we're seeing Canada and Mexico, they may be complaining, but they're also stepping up their efforts to help us at the border. They're stepping up their efforts to take back some of those people that come into our country from theirs. And they are stepping up on the enforcement of the fentanyl and the drug trafficking and the human trafficking at the border. Finally, the Mexican military is at the border. So I think while it scares some conservatives a little bit, this idea of tariffs and everybody's watching the stock market go up and down and act a little crazy, give it some time. Unfortunately, there has to be a little bit discomfort to get the ultimate goal, which is, number one, to bring businesses back ultimately to the United States so we increase our GDP. Number two, have our allies, and I'll use air quotes around that, actually doing their fair share as well to keep us safe. So I don't know. I think everybody needs to take a deep breath around the tariffs. We'll see what happens. Nothing is forever. But we have to see what we can do. This is the chance. And we've got 2 years. That's what everybody said when Trump gets into office. So you got to move quickly on this kind of thing. And I'm happy that he's playing hardball. And I know it's not easy, because I know he's got people in his own party and probably even in the White House with them who are saying, be careful with the tariffs. They don't love it as much as he does. So we'll see what happens, but we need the push.
I love the idea that he's looking at it. We're all looking at this like he's got 2 years. I think he's trying to get it all done in 60 days.
I know. Like 4 minutes is what's happening right now. It's amazing to me. People were laughing that his speech was 90 minutes. I'm like, the guy needs all that time to talk about what he's done so far. It's incredible.
That's a great point. Yeah.
All right. So speaking of the presidency, there is a man who is desperate to be in the White House in just a couple of years. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, started a podcast this week, and he decided he was going to use that platform to not only talk about some issues that he's dealing with in California, but also to bring in conservatives, to have conversations and try to find some middle ground and all of this. Now, as soon as I heard this idea, I screamed in my head, conservatives, please don't do this. Because he said these high profile conservatives that you see at CPAC are going to be are going to be the ones that, are going to be on my podcast. Well, I was hoping that no one would take him up on it. But our buddy, and I love him, I have so much respect for Charlie Kirk. He's done incredible work at Turning Point USA. He is a friend. He's a colleague of ours here at Salem. He was the first conservative guest on Gavin Newsom's podcast this week. And there are a lot of people who are glad Charlie went there and kind of met Gavin Newsom where he was and spoke to the people who'd be listening to this podcast. But I feel like there's something really sinister at play. And I think Gavin Newsom is trying to use this podcast to get himself more moderate. He knows he already has support from lefties. He needs moderates throughout the rest of the country. And he's using, I know it, Katie, I know how this guy operates. He's using it to try to make himself look moderate and acceptable to the people sitting in Oklahoma, even though he's run California into the ground. Take a listen. This is Charlie Kirk and Gavin Newsom, and a pretty shocking admission from Gavin.
So like you right now should come out and be like, you know what? The young man who's about to win the state championship in the long jump in female sports,
right.
that shouldn't happen. You as the governor should step out say no.
No, and I appreciate.
But like, would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. So that's easy to call out, the unfairness of that. There's also a humility and a grace, that these poor people are more likely to commit suicide, have anxiety and depression. And the way that people talk down to vulnerable communities is an issue that I have a hard time with as well. So both things I can hold in my hand. How can we address this issue with the kind of decency that I think, is inherent in you, but not always expressed?
Okay.
That's in you, but not expressed.
I know.
Boy.
That too. All right. I want to say some things about this. So first of all, I love that he talks about the need for humility and grace. Amen for that. We could all use more of that. But I just find it so hypocritical that he would call this an issue of fairness because, as Fetterman said the other day, so Senator Fetterman actually voted with all the other Democrats to allow men in women's sports. And he said, it's because I worry. And he said this, I worry about this tiny minority of transgender athletes, right? And that right there is the heart of what's wrong with this. Why are you making allowances for what you admit is a tiny minority when it's really unfair to every woman that they are competing against, every girl, every woman that they're competing against? And I also it has to be said, this talking point that Newsom pulls out about how, they're more inclined to commit suicide and this kind of thing. It's demonstrably wrong. It has been proven. It has been said again and again and again. That is an incorrect statistic. So you just make me so frustrated.
It's so funny. I'm listening to it and I was frustrated for totally different reasons, but nonetheless, it left me feeling frustrated. So I think Gavin Newsom just told you exactly, I think you're consuming it exactly right. He's saying, yeah, maybe it's not fair to have a guy compete against my daughter, but, also we have to be fair to this small group. And that's exactly what we're arguing against. You just stated it perfectly. Now, a lot of Democrats, like the wild ones in California, are saying that Charlie Kirk won this war and beat this out of Gavin Newsom to admit that men shouldn't be playing in female sports. I don't take it that way. I think he's going to do nothing about any of that as a problem in California. And I know that because I've watched him. And the truth is that there was a bill in the assembly launched by a Republican to protect women's sports. It happened a few months ago. What did Gavin Newsom do? He directed Democrats to kill that bill. If he wanted to protect women's sports, he would have done it. He doesn't want to do that. He does want to serve that tiny little minority. He does want to serve that group of people. But here's what infuriates me is that earlier in the podcast, Gavin Newsom sits down and yucks it up with Charlie Kirk, really kind of disarms him, saying, oh, my son's a huge fan of yours. He wants to stay home from school to meet you today. And Charlie Kirk says, well, why didn't you let him? You shut down schools for 2 years in California, which was a great comeback. I mean, Charlie did great. I'm not even insulting Charlie. I just hate the fact that we have given Gavin Newsom an opportunity to say what you just heard. And in some circles, that will be interpreted as moderate. That will be interpreted as somebody who's just common sense. And they will use this in the next few years to launch his campaign. And he's going to do it on the backs of conservatives. I just still feel really strongly about the fact that we should not let him use our own beliefs against us. And that's what he's going to be doing.
And this is what they do. So we're going through the very similar thing here in Virginia, where we've got a very important governor's race this year.
Yeah.
Governor Youngkin can only serve one term. So we've got an election this November. His great Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Sears, is running for governor. There are a couple of other candidates as well. But they are going to be running against, whoever wins the primary will be running against Abigail Spanberger, who is as radical as they come, consistently voted with Nancy Pelosi, and she is trying to paint herself as a moderate. And that's what they do. And then they are not in any way moderate. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that's what Newsom's trying to do. He's trying to paint himself as a moderate because he knows you have to win the presidential race. He's not a moderate. He is not a moderate. And all I can say is, it's going to be, look, I'm not worried about what's going to happen in 4 years because I think we are on a really good path. But I think it would be absolutely tragic if we finally started to get a hold of all this unbelievable waste, fraud, and abuse, only to have a Democrat come back in and just turn it all back on.
And let me tell you that Gavin Newsom, I wish I could tell you that he's stupid, but he's not. He's a really good politician, and he knows how to. He disarmed Charlie Kirk at the beginning with the compliment about his son. You remember when President Trump came just days after he won the election, he came to California. Gavin Newsom was waiting for him at the bottom of the stairs to shake his hand. This is what this guy does. And he also sees that Democrats are losing right now. The current class of Democrats is not working. So what's he trying to do? He's trying to look like good old Gavin, just common sense. Is Trump too conservative for you? Just a little bit? And he's watching what Trump is doing. The thing that scares me about Newsom is that if, God forbid, he has a chance of becoming president, he will write down everything that Trump has done, this overwhelming, quick pace executive order, and he'll start undoing it as quickly as Trump has implemented it. Yeah. And we can't afford that. So I don't know. I just say proceed with caution with old Gavin Newsom. All right. So I take notes before the show. They're very ugly and rough. And I write down things that we're going to talk about so I don't forget. Right, Katie? And so all I can tell you is that I wrote Jumpy Ladies on my...
yes. Well, you know what this is.
So, I do. So before we run out of time today, I don't know if you have seen this video, but it is cringeworthy to say the least. A lot of females, I think the same crowd that were wearing the pink jackets at President Trump's joint address to Congress, or address to a joint session of Congress, they all got together and they made a very Chumpy video. Listen and look.
Oh my gosh. That's just
all right. So these strong ladies, I know they're fighters. I want to know if that's a room in AOC's house. Did you happen to see that? Because it has like leopard print everywhere. It looks like I'm at Graceland. Is that like Elvis is going to walk out from behind a corner?
No,
I don't know. I think there are definitely different ways of showing you're a fighter rather than these choreographed videos. But these Democrats love them. There's just one more. And clearly it was made the same day because Jasmine Crockett was wearing the same jacket. Here's what our elected leaders do, apparently, when they just don't have enough, I guess, enough to do. There's not enough to save in the country, so they make TikTok videos. Look.
Oh, no. It's a cultural divide. I'm going to get it on the floor. You really about to do it? 40 acres in the mule. This is bigger than the music. You really about to do it? Yeah, they tried to rig the game, but you can't fake influence. They get on it like that. Hey, I'm tripping, I'm sliding, I'm riding through the back like, bust that on a beat, bro. Deep boat in the rap. He a freak though, man down. Call the ambulance, tell him breathe. Let them boys to the cross, they walk around like thieves. What's up with these?
Is there a special kind of ego that is birthed within a person when they win an election? I think it's like you win an election and all of a sudden you're dancing down the hallways of Congress making TikTok videos. I don't know how that happened. I just remember the good old days, Katie. I don't know. Maybe this makes me seem like an old curmudgeon-y dinosaur. I don't know. I just remember the good old days where women, when we would go to work, we would go to work. Like, it didn't matter about cutesy dance videos. We didn't have to jump around. We just went to work and we got the job done. But I don't know. Maybe that's silly. I guess it's all about the TikTok followers.
And what about taking seriously the job of representing American citizens and doing the work in Washington, D.C.? Okay, beyond me. Okay, before we sign off, I just have to ask, are you watching anything fun?
Have I told you I've been watching Paradise?
No. What's Paradise?
Okay, I love Paradise. It is on Hulu. And it is James Marsden and Sterling K. Brown. I mean, there's a few little like wokey things that you'll find, like everything these days. But the story is, I don't want to give away too much, but there is going to be something. We don't know if it's a natural disaster. We don't know if it's like a nuclear attack, but something happens. And they take 30,000 Americans and they go underground.
Oh, yes. Okay.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's an interesting show. So I've been loving that. What are you watching?
So I'm watching the ER reboot, which is called The Pit.
How is that? Is that good? I loved ER.
I loved ER, and I am loving this, and I'm loving grown-up Noah Wyle. He is just he's
in it.
Yes.
Oh, I gotta watch it.
He's the lead doctor. He's a very different character from what he played in ER, and he's just so human and so appealing. And again, I mean, I'm going to say with the same, you've got to be careful. It's got definitely the woke stuff,
Yeah. But you can have fun with it still if it's not too overwhelming.
Yeah. So compared to, for example, did you ever watch the show called The Good Doctor?
Yes. I liked that show. It was okay. It never caught me.
But if you watch it now, because I've been watching that as well, it is like one lesson in DEI. It is it so beats you over the head with the DEI propaganda. That one is really over the top. But The Pit, I would say, is really very good, and I think it's super addictive. I love it.
One other show, and I'm going to cover my face to tell you this one because I just said I'm like a dinosaur. But I also have a Matlock problem.
Do you really? Oh, that's funny.
Not the old Matlock. There's a new Matlock with Kathy Bates.
No.
Yes. And I want to tell you, it's good. And what's really interesting about those shows, they're very twisty and turny and great. And you get a weaving storyline, but you also get individual episodes, which I enjoy. But there are some really interesting places that you go because really at the core of Matlock is that this woman who's 75 goes to work for a law firm because she believes they hid information about opioids and opioids killed her daughter. So she kind of goes undercover at this law firm.
Interesting.
And let me tell you that you find yourself in some situations at the end of an episode where you go, okay, I'm rooting for Matlock, but is what she doing really good? Like, is it justified? I mean, there's some really interesting conundrums that you find yourself in, moral dilemmas, I think, as you watch the show. And I think they put you in those situations on purpose. So I don't know. I really like the new Matlock. It's already been renewed. Kathy Bates, I think, won a Golden Globe also for her role. It's good. It's a CBS show. So it's on everybody's lineup.
Okay.
All right. So there we go. That's what we've been watching. A little bit of fun today. And thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to get Katie's book. It's called Next Gen Marxism, available right now on Amazon. You can also go to her website, katiegorka.org. You can find her on Facebook by searching Catherine Gorka and find her on Twitter, Gorka Katie. And you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Jennifer Horn Radio and on Truth and X at Jennifer Horn. And of course, thank you for the 5-star reviews. We appreciate them. Keep them coming and continue to share Happy Women with your friends. We appreciate it. You can connect with us on all of the platforms, YouTube and Rumble and all of your favorite podcast sites at salempodcastnetwork.com/Happy Women. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Happy Women Podcast.